I'm unsure if these entities have another name, but I've always just referred to them as static men. When I was a young child, I remember waking up late in the middle of the night. I was fast asleep, blanketless, on a round woven rug that laid midway along the wood panel wall of my aunt's living room. Half asleep and growing chilly, I reached around for a blanket that wasn't there. I believe it was then that I heard the muffled voices, and I noticed the pale, eerie glow of static flickering from the old TV. The light from the old television painted the room in weak and sickly hues of greens and blues. Still half washed with sleep, I was able to see my uncle asleep in his recliner from across the room. I heard the muffled voices again and assumed it was my parents arguing. Not really wanting to get into trouble for being awake, I kept my eyes slightly closed while pretending to be fast asleep. The muffled voices seemed closer, and yet still unintelligible. I started to become afraid and wanted to run to my uncle for comfort, or at the very least, have him change the channel, because the voices I heard sounded even closer and were coming from not my parents, but from the old TV. Peeking out as a child pretending to be asleep, I faced the television and I saw them. The strange silhouettes of staticky figures on the screen, noticeably appearing more defined than the chaotic jittering of the background. They moved unnaturally, fading softly from one moment to the next. They stood there, watching us from just beyond the glass. No longer speaking, just eerily watching, quietly. It was a while before I noticed the air had become almost electrically charged, with a smell that I now know is ozone. As the television flickered off for the last time, there was no transition from when the television went out until when he appeared in front of it. He was accompanied by a low idling hum, similar to fluorescent light that was more felt than heard. I closed my eyes tightly, hoping to fool this strange figure out of desperation as I softly wept out of fear. The hair on my skin raised with a prickling sensation as I felt him walk past me. Forcing myself to peek again, I watched this strange silhouette-like entity through my watery eyes. For several moments, as he stood in front of my uncle, distorting and scrambling himself, slowly fine-tuning every detail and unnaturally becoming his identical, except mirroring every noticeable feature in muted, unnatural tones. I watched, horrified, as my uncle faded into the nothingness before me. And slowly, this strange thing took his place. Unable to control myself, I frantically sat up and erupted loudly in tears, hoping that this was just a bad dream. He, this thing, now my uncle, turned from where he stood looking down, expressionless at me, while I uncontrollably sobbed and simply walked out of the room. I sat there, fearfully crying in the dim room, not knowing what to do, while listening to the same unintelligible voices being heard again from elsewhere in the house.